can I introduce you to Alastair Strachan from the RIPE NCC? And Alastair is going to talk about BGP routing security, Hijacks versus RPKI. Alastair is a Community Development Officer at the NCC and has come over from Amsterdam to join us. Second time presenting at NANOG, and as ever, always a pleasure.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks, everyone. Wow, you weren't lying. It's kind of bright. First up, I had a dream last night that I tripped up the stairs and pulled this entire curtain down, so I'm quite happy already with how this presentation's going. As I said, my name's Alastair Strachan. I work at the RIPE NCC. I don't think we need to give an introduction on the RIPE NCC. I think we all know who we are, but we are the regional internet registry for Europe, Middle East, and Central Asia. Today I'm going to be talking to you about RPKI. I think or hope most of you have heard of RPKI at this point. So RPKI is a security framework using public key infrastructure and resource certification for BGP route origin validations. It allows resource holders to prove ownership and create authorizations, also known as ROAs. So ASNs can use ROAs to validate the origin of BGP announcements, and it prevents certain hijacks like BGP origin hijacks, misorigination, and route leaks. So I've put it's a very simple graphic. It's a pretty straightforward overview of two types of origin hijacks that we see. So one being the same prefix. So in this instance, we see AS1 is announcing prefix P. I'm not going to read out a long line of IP addresses. This is obviously propagated through AS2, 3, 4, and so on. AS5 is, I don't know, a Blues Brother interpretation, but the sign of a bad man is the hat and glasses. They are announcing that same prefix maliciously. And what happens there, this gets propagated to AS6, and any AS that receives this malicious announcement may direct traffic. We call it a local hijack because it is based on BGP path selection, and it is only who gets that announcement from that AS5 to AS6. So in this scenario, AS5 is attempting to divert certain traffic to itself as opposed to the rightful holder. With a more specific prefix hijack, similar situation, but the way BGP works, if it is a more specific prefix, it will automatically be picked up and propagated through. So this is what we call a global hijack. So again here, prefix P is announced by 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. AS5 announces a /48 of that, and that then takes precedent in the way BGP works. So RPKI itself, how it works is basically it creates authorized statements to say, we are authorizing this AS or this AS to announce my prefix. So in this slide, you can see AS100 is saying, I've got prefix Y. I'm going to create an authorized statement that says AS300 is totally allowed to announce my prefix. This is then signed. Sorry. This is then signed and there it is. The slide's disappearing here. This is then signed, and that signed authorization or signed announcement is added and published to the RPKI repository. So when AS300 is now announcing prefix Y, AS200 is able to hit this RPKI repository and make a more informed and secured routing decision saying, hey, we know that this has been signed and authorized to announce. So there's two elements when it comes to RPKI. The first one is the signing step. I will say there's one thing here. Signing and validation, they can be done separately, but we would always advise to do them both. So with the signing step, this involves using LAR certificates to produce ROAs or route origin authorizations. So these ROAs specify which AS system can announce the prefix in BGP and set a maximum prefix length. It's a very straightforward step. It's pretty easy to do to create these ROAs. A lot of the big RARs have an easy to use interface to do this. So with RPKI, it relies on using the 5 RARs as the trust anchor. So unlike with the kind of resource allocation where IANA's at the top, with RPKI it's the RARs that are at the top and act as these trust anchors. The certificate structure follows that RAI hierarchy. Resource holders can then produce these ROAs that I've mentioned. I'll go into what a ROA is, and runs through those, and it create these for their prefixes and sign them for RPKI authorization. So with the RPKI chain of trust, this is just a graphic that kind of shows the levels. So all the RARs have these self-signed root certificates for all the resources, not just their own, but all resources. So RARs can use this root certificate to sign LAR certificates that list all the LAR's resources. The LAR can then create an authorized statement called a ROA and sign them with the LAR's private key. So with these authorized statements, the legitimate holder of the IP address block can make authoritative statement to say, this AS, this AS, this AS is allowed to announce my prefix or originate my prefix in BGP. So a ROA, what is a ROA? ROA is an authorized statement created by a resource holder. It confirms the specific IP prefix is authorized to originate from a designated AS, autonomous system. So LARs have the capability to create these ROAs for IP or any of resources that they manage. There can be multiple ROAs that exist for the same prefix, and ROAs can overlap. A lot of time we see this in Anycast instances, things along those lines. So it is possible to have more than one ROA for one prefix. There are a few different types when it comes to how RPKI can be done, how the signing can be done. So first up, there's hosted RPKI. Now, this is where basically it delegates the certificate creation and the ROA management all to the RARs. It's the most easy way to do it. A lot of the RARs, for example, the RIPE NCC has an RPKI dashboard where you can quickly go in and create these ROAs quite straightforward. It automates the signing, key rollovers. It's a very simple way to do RPKI. We also have delegated RPKI. So in delegated RPKI, LARs host their own certificate authority, or CA. They're signing ROAs and issue resource certificates directly, and therefore providing RPKI services themselves directly. So LARs maintain this hierarchy of resource certificates, starting with a trust anchor. And this is to ensure that chain of trust while hosting the certificate authority. So LARs are then responsible for validating the customer certificate requests, the ROAs, managing the CA software, ensuring the certificate availability. It's a lot more hands-on and a lot more involved. It's a lot more complex. So I've listed here 2 of the certificate authority or CA softwares. So we've got Krill from NLnet Labs, and RPKID from Dragon Research Labs. This is something that's come in new. We call it publication of services or hybrid RPKI. Now, hybrid RPKI allows entities to manage their own certificate authority, but utilize the third party, often one of the RARs, for the publication of the ROAs. So this model, ARIN, APNIC, and RIPE NCC, and a few of the NIRs already offer this. And it enables entities to control their keys and ROAs, but using the RAR for their publication means it's through a high availability service. So it reduces costs, it reduces risks, and also affords entities the flexibility to manage their resources across various RAR regions. It really is the best in between. So I mentioned there's 2 elements when it comes to RPKI. So obviously, first of all, was the signing. This is where you're creating ROAs for your prefixes and things. And now we're looking at the validation of this. So with validation, the second part, network operators can download and validate these statements that have been created by other route. That word always gets me when I'm in America. Created by other operators to make better routing decisions based on the available RPKI data. It's a little more complex, as you do need to configure routers and devices to verify that the data that other operators have created is valid. But it is an important part that makes RPKI a lot more effective when it comes to making routing decisions with a more secure, safer environment. So the validation process itself, basically, as I said, it's a way of authenticating routing information. So it confirms the authenticity using a public key and certificate. To perform the validation itself, you do need Validator software installed. I'll go through a few different versions that we have. And the goal of this is to validate the origin of any BGP announcement. So sometimes it's called BGP origin validation, sometimes root origin validation, just because we like to have as many acronyms as we possibly can in this industry. So the validators themselves, the validator, it's a pretty straightforward setup, well, he says. The RPKI validator connects to the RPKI repository, either using rsync or RDP protocol. It utilizes trust anchor locators, or TALs, or TALS, again, because we love an acronym, to establish a connection with repositories and subsequently download the ROAs, these ROAs. So the validator ensures that all the ROAs are validating, I feel like I'm just repeating the word validating at the minute. It creates and maintains, it basically validates the chain of trust and their associated certificate authorities. And then once that validation is successful, it creates a validated cache of all the valid ROAs. So in this slide we have, okay, the validation process itself. It's a pretty top, like the layers are as follows. So at the very top, the most trusted certificate is the root certificate. So at the top of the hierarchy, and this certificate is self-signed and contains a public key and a digital signature. We then go down to the LAR certificate. This is something that the local internet registries themselves sign. So it's signed by the root certificate, and it also contains its own public key and digital signature. We then get to the ROAs, which just contains the digital signature, and this is what is verifying that announcement, the prefix origin in BGP. So as long as this chain is complete, so starting with the ROA to the LAR certificate to the root certificate, as long as it is complete and all the digital signatures and keys are all verified, then the ROA is considered valid. If there's any break in that chain at all, the ROA is considered invalid. So as a whole, valid ROAs are sent to the router. If the chain of trust is verified, it's good to go, will be sent through. If there are any invalid routes, you can basically program or configure the router to do whatever you want with them. So they can discard them, they can treat them as a lower priority, and that's how the validator makes those decisions and enables better routing decisions for the networks. So what's new in RPKI? A few things with the validators themselves. So the original validator was actually by the end of the RIPE NCC. We decommissioned, or we sunsetted that. Oh, I should have got that date recently, a number of years ago, somewhere between here and the beginning of time. RPKI validators, they are a lot more mature now. There's been a lot of work on them, making them more stable. The installation and configuration documentation is a lot better. There was a lot of research a few years ago in regards to vulnerabilities around DOS attacks. So it's a lot more of a stable situation with the validators that we have now. Here's a few of the validator software that we have. It's just a reference. So there's Routinator, which is built by NL Net Labs. We have Fort, which is the open source RPKI validator. There's Octo RPKI, which is Cloudflare's relaying party software. And then RPKI Client, which is integrated into OpenBSD. If you would like any more, I know everyone hates when there's a link on a slide because no one's going to be able to click it, but if you need it, it's available on the slide deck. In regards to the validators themselves, it's often advisable to run more than one validator. This is a list of kind of all the main validators that we have. As you can see, Rootinator is way ahead of the others with almost a 80% market share. The reason Validator is in red is because if any of you were running that, please stop, because it is no longer supported. So please use one of the other alternatives if you are guilty of using the old RPKI RIPE NCC validator. Here's some incredibly hard to read graphs that I thought I'd throw in. This kind of shows the steady growth and adoption of RPKI over the years. So the top is the number of certificates, not to blow the RIPE NCC's trumpet, but I'm going to, because we are quite high up in comparison. I mean, we obviously have also 76 countries that we cover, so it's understandable that there's a fair few there. Something to note, you may see on the second graph, you'll see some jumps. Often what we find is when large telcos or large ISPs or incumbents in other countries, when they sign their ROAs, when they cover their space, we see these big jumps. So one thing I wanted to try and do is show kind of the adoption per RIR and then have more of a breakdown as to what's been happening, mainly in the RIPE region. I did get some stats for North America, but it's a little skewed, and I'll explain when we get to those slides. So with the percentages, you can see here the NCC for V4 is sitting around 61%, for V6, 37%. You can see the others are, how can I say this politely, are not as high. So yeah, I mean, if you aren't doing RPKI yet, please do, because it's really important to see these numbers come up, and I think there's a big push coming in from all the RIRs in regards to getting RPKI as important as it should be. So as I mentioned, we do at the NCC, we cover quite a fair amount of countries and regions. So it was very hard for me to I didn't want to just bring up 76 different graphs about the same thing. So this shows the countries in the last 6 months with the largest change or the significant change in coverage. So Armenia saw a 16% increase. 15% of that was due to MTS Armenia. Again, like I said earlier, we often see these larger jumps when bigger telcos or incumbents or ISPs sign their spaces. So with Azerbaijan, we saw a 4% increase, and that was due to Azatel. In Germany and Italy, so Germany was a 4% increase, Italy was a 10%. That was due to Vodafone, Vodafone Germany and Vodafone Italia, both doing the same. So that actually, that jumped, 10% and 4% respectively. In Saudi, we saw an 85% increase. 81% increase. This was due to a joint effort between Saudi Telecom and Etisalat, which are two of the big players in that region. And then in Turkmenistan, we saw quite a massive 95% increase. Now this was due to Turkmentel, which is the government-controlled, state-operated organization. So again, it's nice when we have these big all-seeing powers when it comes to this, not so much for other things, but it's great to see that we are seeing these big jumps in certain regions. Now, I wanted to do some North America stats, but they're a little bit skewed, mainly because this is allocation from the RIPE NCC. This isn't so for all the RAs, or for all North America, sorry, there's just over 30% of V4 is covered with ROAs. From the space from the NCC, we see over 65%. Now, here you can see the largest gray box is covered. Sorry, covered is gray, yellow is uncovered. A100 row, which is the German Amazon, has that huge space, and all of their spaces is covered. Actually makes up over 50+% of V4 allocated from the NCC. Soft layer technologies, I believe, is IBM. So if anyone is here from there, please find me so I can press you to do RPKI. And I wanted to go through, so yeah, here we see 65% is covered, around 35% is still needing to be. If anyone is here from GTT, find me, because you've got part of your space covered, but then you've also got a lot of your space not. So it would be good to get that sorted and get that covered. Finally, I did the same graph for Canada. This was more, so Canada in total has around 42% of its V4 covered. But from the NCC's lot that's assigned to Canadian organizations, it's around 50%, with the majority of Tata Communications. Now, I am well aware that North America also includes a whole host of islands and Caribbean, in the Caribbean. So I didn't want to go through, it's not that you've been excluded intentionally, it's just that would have been a whole lot of slides that would have been basically exactly the same. So if you do want any information regarding those, please come and find me. This graph that you're looking at, or this image that you're looking at, is actually is a live file, so we can see, you can hover over to see who's who. So if you do have any further questions on that, please come find me. You can't miss the dude with a mullet and an English accent. I don't blend in very well. With that, I feel like I've talked a million miles an hour, but I will say, if there are any questions, either now or find me afterwards. Afterwards would be preferable, because I feel like someone's going to come with a really technical question and I'm going to have to slowly dance off stage as you ask it.
Thank you, Alastair.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I love a no question queue. And look,
We have one question. I'll block him from this side if it's a difficult one.
Hi, I'm Slav from Sastel, a provider in Saskatchewan, Canada. Can you return to that slide where you showed the adoption rates per IRR? That was quite interesting. But there was something weird there. Like, it was quite high in the RIPE region for IPv4, but way lower for IPv6. Why is that?
That is a very good question. And if you can find the answer and tell me as to why that is. Yeah, we see, I don't know if it's a case that, I have to choose my words wisely here, because I can't say. V6 is not as important to a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah. Probably.
So we see a lot of this focus on V4 within the region, and that's because there's a lot of people who have assignments, but then either they're not being announced or what. So we see a relatively high allocations of V6, but whether they're being used, that's a different question.
I guess that's also on the slide for Canada.
Yes.
I found it interesting or unusual that I didn't see any of the real Canadian providers there.
A lot of the times they will have either, so for example, for Amazon, they're in the US is A100.ro. So what we can do, if you want to come and find me, if we move the mouse around, it highlights exactly which organization is there. But sometimes it's a case, it's either an entity has taken over an already existing thing in Europe, and they've bought that out, and it's now been moved over to a Canadian entity. But yeah, this is just what we pulled from the stats. But feel free to find me. I'll be around, and we can have a look at that.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Just a quick interlude. Is Ben in the house? Because oh, you're there. Okay, I can see you. Great. That's all right. Just a small panic. Remote question.
Question from online from Jeff Houston. When you talk about covered, what do you mean? Are you referring to advertisements, to address spans, or are you referring to allocate assigned addresses? Stats are great, but you need to know a little more context to be meaningful.
That is a very good question. And my presenter notes have gone because I have that answered in one of the things. Where is it? Jeff, I will get back to you if that's okay, because the answer that I need is not here. No. Jeff, I will message you.
Okay.
Hi. Out of sheer curiosity, is there any...
Excuse me, who are you?
Sorry, Curtis Harrell with Arista Networks. Just curious if there's any kind of public reporting or metrics gathering on validation failures, basically a measurement of efficacy of blocking hijacks.
To my knowledge, no, but that is something that I can put you in contact with my colleague Emil, who is a whiz with all things stats.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, find me and we can figure that out for sure.
Great.
And if not, we can get someone to figure it out for us.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Oh, one more.
Howdy, George Beek, University of California, Santa Cruz. When do you think it's going to be the day that's going to be mandatory that RPKI is deployed?
Never.
Ever?
No. It's hard to tell. I mean, I know there's a lot of people at the NCC who would like it to be mandatory, but again, with consensus bottom-up policy development processes, the NCC does what we're told. So at this point, I don't know. I think it would be great to have it because it is, especially when it comes to the creation of ROAs, it's a really straightforward, for most of the RARs, it's a very straightforward thing to do. So at this point, I'm not aware that there is, and certainly from the RIPE NCC's point, I'm not aware that there's any plan to make it mandatory, but who knows, hopefully soon.
Maybe before we retire, right?
Yeah. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? No? Great.
Awesome.
Thank you again,
Thank
Alastair.
you.